Welcome to Soundbreaker. In today's episode, we're talking to Joe Aboud, who is a founder of 44 Sound, 444 Sound, or 444 Sound. Thank you for joining us. For our
Thank
listeners who
you.
might not be familiar with you, could you please just take a minute and introduce yourself and tell us just a bit about yourself before we dive into it?
Yeah, thanks for having me.
My
I've
pleasure.
taken my experiences from, the label and DSP world. My background's at Atlantic Records, an independent label called Hitco, Apple Music, and I've developed this artist and label services firm, so essentially consulting on whatever clients might need to help them develop and grow, whether that's A&R, marketing, streaming, digital help, and beyond. Our clients really range from independent artists to management companies, labels, distributors. So we're really working with clients of all shapes and sizes and all genres.
Amazing. Joe, before we really dive into it, and I'm sure it's going to be an informative and inspiring and insightful interview, can you take us back to your teenage years and
Yeah,
just what inspired you? Was it somewhere in the family, in the music business, your parents, or you influenced by a band, or you were like, what got you to this point? Like, you decided at a point in your life, it's like, you know what, this is the path I want to take. That's what I want to pursue.
yeah. I mean, I think that I originally started out wanting to go into entertainment law, actually. Both of my parents are immigrants, and so I think it was always kind of drilled into me, you get a good job, you get a good career, and so law seemed like a safe path. And I loved music and I loved entertainment, and so I thought this is kind of the best of both worlds. And then I started, I did a couple entertainment law classes in high school and a couple camps, and I realized I think law was a little bit more boring than I was wanting it to be. And I wanted something that allowed me to have a little bit more of a direct connection with artists. And so, funny enough, I won tickets on the radio when I was 15 to a private music showcase. I didn't know who the artist was at the time. The artist ended up being Natasha Bedingfield.
Uh
And
huh.
so it ended up being an industry showcase at Rockwood Music Hall in New York. And I go to the show, I meet Sony Music, who she was signed to Epic at the time, to get the tickets. And, I meet her rep. And at the end, I said, I'd love to get into the music business. Can I shadow you? Can I volunteer? Like, what can I do to get involved? And of course, she said, well, we're a big company, like we take internships for college credit, but send me your resume. And I am like a freshman in high school. I don't have a resume, I don't have college credit, any of those
Yeah.
things. And so I kind of went home and cobbled together something. And she ended up, for whatever reason, taking a liking to me and saying, you know what, we have a slot that we're supposed to give to a college intern, but if you kind of keep it on the down low and don't tell anybody, I would love to have you come in after school. So I would rush in after school from New Jersey, take the train, get to Epic at like 4 o'clock, and then just stay there till 9 or 10 and come home every day. And so
Wow.
that was the best experience for me because I'm in high school, 15, 16, and for almost 2 years I got to intern at Epic and really get a start. And so I was like, this is the path. I need to be in the frontline business, working with artists. And it kind of, took off from there because I was able to say, look at all the experience I have and I'm just a kid.
Amazing.
So
Talking about starting an interview with the right foot, about being inspiring and motivating. I mean, it's amazing because I know being in Jersey, taking the train, and I know where Epic used to be. So,
yeah,
wow, a mindset. I guess if you have the mindset and you know what you want, you could do it. Yes, it's a struggle, and I know you
that's right.
struggled a lot, but probably every day you were happy, smiling, like you're doing something none of your high
hmm
school buddies were doing.
It's true. And it
Unbelievable.
was fun. It was
Yes.
before you get jaded,
Yes.
you're still excited about it.
And listen, Epic is, they had a lot of the major artists.
They
They
did.
had
That's right.
everybody on
hmm
their mother on. Yes, absolutely. Um, let's talk about Apple Music. You work for Apple Music, and you know how working for Apple Music kind of changed, or I should say, influenced your approach dealing with artists and label and all of that. And what is the key, should I say, lessons or points that you learned so that you kind of input it into your business life and whatever you decided to do after that?
Yeah. I think that was a really key experience for me because it helped me learn. about there's a certain level of tact I think that you
Yeah.
need as a music executive, and so that's
Yes.
something that is developed, and so I learned a lot about that because I was on the artist and label relations team. You learn about how important communication is. I was just an intern when I started out there, and then became started working there after my internship, and it sort of left me a little bit in awe of I think not only the level of connections that you have to maintain in order to be successful in that role, but
Yes.
also how to, effectively juggle your time. There's all these different partners coming at you with requests, all these problems, and you have to figure out a way to solve them all, be solution oriented, and be, diplomatic and all that stuff. And so I think that was a great experience for me to just learn how to deal with really high level, executives at the time.
Amazing. Again, you work to both sides of the equation, major labels and independent labels. And you've seen both of strategies, the fundamental, the infrastructure, the system. Tell us about that and how I know a lot of the strategies, I'm going to say, changes from artists, but it's not really. I think it's all about how a major label run an independent
Right.
back in the day when you were involved in that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's great things on both sides. There's pros and cons to the majors and the indies. Um, I think the one thing is that the majors have a lot more red tape, in the sense that there's a lot more approvals you have to go through. The legal team is maybe a little bit more important there. At an indie, you can be a little bit more nimble. You can, activate a campaign more quickly. You see something's happening, you don't really have to go through five levels of approvals. And I think the other thing is that at a major, you might have 25 people on the email chain, and so it's great to have this big, robust team where everybody has a responsibility. But I also think that work can tend to get pushed around, and there's maybe less responsibility taken for actually executing things, right? On an indie, it's like, it's a small team. We got to kind of roll up our sleeves and do the work. And so I find that like execution tends to be a little bit more efficient,
Hmm.
actually with less people on the team, less cooks in the kitchen. And I think that maybe indies are also a little bit more open to a creative and new approach to things. Like there's something to be said for the tried and true ways of doing things, but when you have really nothing to lose, you're kind of not stuck in the old
Yes.
ways. You're open to new things. So
You're saying that sometimes a lot of the independent labels, they have the mindset of being more innovative.
I agree. Yeah, I think
Yes,
so.
yes. And spontaneous, like, hey, let's do it. Let's make it
Exactly.
happen. Yeah,
Less
yeah.
cookie cutter, maybe.
Yeah. Yes. Tell us about how to build a relationship and how did you work on it, between a digital streaming platform and partners. Like that's really sometimes tough to maintain really with the DSPs.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I try to do, throughout my career, I try to do like a really good job of maintaining authentic relationships with whoever it is, right? Like we all work in music, we all are doing it because we love it for the most part. And so I think that there's ways of connecting with people that are maybe a little bit easier than other industries, right? Music is kind of like the universal connector. And so it's
Yes.
easy to, everybody wants artists to win. And I think finding angles that get people excited about finding a new artist, making them feel like they're, um, one of the first to champion someone, right? One of the early adopters.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's what it's about, right? And I think it's like a lot of people are viewing streaming as the new radio. And I think that radio had this reputation maybe of being, maybe a little slimy or, a little bit sales oriented. And I think that, people at the streaming services have a little bit more of an incentive and desire to find and champion these new artists and kind of spotlight discovery in a new way. And it's like we don't have to have the radio research. We don't have to have, the big budgets. It's really just about, is this an interesting artist? Is this a good song? And so I think
Amazing.
people are willing to take more chances on things.
Yes. What's your thought on, you know, having TikTok and Instagram reels and YouTube shorts and all of that kind of come into the play of the music business and became a major influence on it. Yes, we have Spotify, we have Apple, we have Deezer, Amazon. they came in a different way, and they made such a dent and a big impact on artists, independent artists, like artists you never heard of. All of a sudden, even they call him
Hmm.
he's a TikTok artist and all of that. How did that kind of change the equation of, and the strategies and of artists and major labels, independent labels?
Yeah, I think it changed a lot because I feel like people are very focused on short form content. Right now it's like very few
Correct.
people are investing in music videos. Um, and I think it just says a lot about the attention span of the consumer. One of the hardest things that we're facing is just the level of volume
Yeah.
um, that's being, that's coming through the pipeline. I think the latest stat is something, it keeps it keeps growing, but I think it's like 3 million songs a month or something like that are coming out on DSPs every month, and that's just it's a very hard number to wrap your head around. And so we're all competing for this very limited airspace, and it becomes, what are the ways that in the first 2 seconds you can hook someone, um, and make them want to stop scrolling. And so I think that ends up turning into a lot of artists, maybe doing gimmicky things to try to hook people in. But and that's true. I think that these platforms, there's always going to be new platforms. It's always going to be about how do we help the artist tell their story, and what are the reasons that an artist that a fan should care about an artist. Like a good song is important. Maybe having a great singing voice is important, but it's like that's not always enough. And so I think that these platforms are a nice opportunity for fans to be able to see, really like an inside look at who these artists are. Like the walls are kind of down. A lot of these people are filming selfie videos, and so it's like getting a window into who the artist really is. It's a little bit less about the glitz and glam and the larger than life pop stars that, maybe used to be kind of running the charts. And now I think people want something to connect with these artists on. They want to feel like they can relate to them. And so it's about honing these artist stories so that like fans are able to digest it and understand why they should care.
Do you think, Joe, I what you just talked about, and what we, these new platforms that they've been around for some years now, and they made a major impact on the music industry and the
Yeah.
entertainment industry in a whole. Is that where the future going? Artists and fans, consumers, users,
Yeah.
the involvement, and that's kind of like, is that where it's pivoting to, and where the streaming, the regular DSPs, digital streaming platforms, kind of slow disappear, like the retail outlets back in the days disappeared and they've just gone?
No, I don't, I think that they're all serving different purposes. I think that, but I do think that all these platforms are here to stay in different ways, and people are finding, okay, what is each platform for, right? And I think that a lot of the artists that I work with are using Instagram for, let's say, photos and curating a more
Yes.
aesthetic. They want people to go to their Instagram and see like great photos of them, and maybe it's a little bit more curated. I think TikTok is for showing like more of a fun, personality driven side of them. And then I think these other DSPs are trying to incorporate, you know, things that the digital platforms are doing well to try to make music a little bit more social, right? So it's like
Yeah.
clips on Spotify, like uploading these short videos. They're trying to get, a little bit more engagement and interaction from these artists. So I feel like they're all serving different purposes. Ultimately, like people want a home where they can listen to music.
Yes.
Um, and so I think that the DSPs aren't going anywhere. But it's certainly, shifting the way that people are thinking about making music. And I'm excited that it feels like people are starting to steer away from like the TikTok mentality, right? Of making songs maybe with TikTok in mind, like, oh, that's a TikTok hook. That sounds like it could go viral. So I feel like there is a little bit of a desire now to return to like talent and musicality, and a little bit less of the internet virality, which is exciting for those artists who are really talented and maybe aren't great at social media and need that to kind of turn back into fans wanting to see an artist live and play an instrument.
Interesting, interesting, I should say. outlook on it. Yes.
Yeah.
Can you share some of the example that you succeeded with brand partnerships, influencers, and influencer integration that you were
Yeah.
involved in arranged?
There's an example that comes to mind. We were working with this artist, Dixie D'Amelio, who is a big, TikTok creator on the platform.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we were rolling out music, and she has all these friends and creators in her life and her network, and so it's like, how can we incorporate that into the story that we're telling? And we ended up shooting a video for a song called Fuck Boy, and involving maybe 20 of her friends and people in her life in the video, in kind of a fun way that made sense. We were able to get lots of content for them to be able to share on their socials, it do kind of fun things in the video that were either Easter eggs for what's coming next, or things that were happening that were relevant in culture at that time, things that made, fans want to rewatch the video, increasing replay value for the video. Like, we really tried to sort of reverse engineer it, I think, so that it was something that was a talking point. And we were able to leverage that to create a little bit of viral action on the song, which ultimately, helped with consumption.
Yeah.
um, so it definitely helps when it's authentic, and it's
Yes.
not, it wasn't a
100% agree.
paid thing. It was real. It was real and part of her life.
Yes. What are some of the key elements that propelled Joel Corey's, head and heart,
Mm.
to join Spotify Billions Club?
That's an interesting one because it's such an earworm, and to this day I still keep hearing, I hear the song everywhere, and people love it. And so, it, like, with that, I don't think we knew what it was going to be. Like, we had a couple records in the dance space that were starting to bubble, and this one was a little bit more pop. And so, it was also the pandemic. I think people wanted something fun to be uplifting during that time. And so, it was, for us at that time, it was all about ways to pour like gas on the fire for that song. We found a little bit of stuff bubbling in the dance space. It was like, okay, where can we engage with people in this space? And maybe it was doing stuff with fitness partners at the time. Joel was a great fitness buff himself, and so it was like we did a couple fitness things. We were finding that it was kind of starting to connect with the LGBT community, so we tried to find some activations that made sense there. Um, we did a DJ set, a virtual DJ set for partners, for key partners at the time during the pandemic, and it was something fun that people were looking forward to. We send everybody care packages, so they had, fun things to open and unwrap during the show. And I think, that was one that, like, we were seeing growth everywhere, and it was like, okay, we need to take this to the next level. There's a little bit of growth in Germany. Like, how do we pour a little bit of advertising fuel in Germany to spread to GSA? How do we,
Yes.
we started playing the song in like restaurants and shops and hotels, and it was really like a slow build, and eventually it was one of those things where the song was everywhere, and people were just infatuated. And that was a time too where, in COVID, people were on their phones. So we developed a fun, like, Instagram filter that ended up being a game that people were playing. And so we were really trying to target every segment of the audience in the industry, like sports and fitness and, beauty and, pop and dance. Like, we were hitting all sides of it. And so I think it just spread like wildfire eventually.
Amazing. Well, you guys put in the work. You said
Yeah,
the tracks, right? Yes.
that's right.
Creative work. Absolutely. It's very important, and you got that. Now, who did you have to pay to to create the Dalai Lama music? What did you have to do? This
Oh
is
my
not something
gosh.
that happens every day. It's not like, I'm just gonna create some music, Dalai Lama music.
No.
No.
This is a fun one.
Yeah.
So we partnered with a woman,
Yeah.
who's amazing, who's based in New Zealand, who is just a devout Buddhist and, a yogi and into meditation and all this stuff. And so she had, this idea to partner with the Dalai Lama to create music because it hadn't been done yet. A lot of people were doing unofficial stuff, but there was nothing with him. And so she ended up pitching something to him, an idea that turned into him inviting her to visit. And she recorded these original mantras
Mm.
um, from him and set it to this original music that we created, this beautiful instrumentation. And so it was a little bit non-traditional. And unfortunately, the album came out right after the pandemic hit. And so it kind of, I don't think it got maybe the push that it really needed at the time. And so we ended up doing a little bit of like a catalog anniversary campaign recently where we put out the song on vinyl, we put the song, the album out on Record Store Day. We put out an exclusive new mantra that we never finished. And so that was an interesting one because it's like it was such a niche campaign.
It is, yeah.
And it's the interesting thing is that one of the tenets of Buddhism is that you don't they don't promote, if I understand correctly, they don't promote commercialism and advertising, and they don't,
Yeah.
those aren't things that are in line with their
Mm.
culture.
So you have
And
to be
so
careful in everything you do, every word, everything.
very much so, like we couldn't even put it on his website because we didn't want to be seen as promoting something that people were gonna buy.
Hmm.
Um, and so that it was very tricky to like word everything when we're usually telling artists, we want to tell fans to stream your music, like that's the call to action. And with this, it was more about how can we integrate this into the culture? How can we get this into yoga studios and meditation platforms? And how can we get people who are really passionate about this to know about this. So that was a fun one. I think as a spiritual leader for him, it was like we had to take that a lot of those cultural, taste and tone kind of things into consideration. And so definitely a very fun one and really honored to have worked on it.
Great, amazing accomplishment. Can you share a pivotal moment during your time at 444 Sounds, and where your consultancy made significant impact on trajectory with artists or labels?
Yeah, something that comes to mind is helping a lot of these independent artists find touch points on DSPs. So we've helped a couple independent artists get, like, for example, the cover of Fresh Finds on Spotify and things like that. And so, for them, it's really life changing because not only is it giving them exposure, which they probably haven't had before, they're getting streams, they're getting followers, they're getting new eyeballs on them, but it's also a pathway for them to maybe have a record deal. Like labels start reaching out, people are watching those types of playlists to see, okay, well, who's the next gen of these artists. So it's really rewarding to get to see artists who are busting their ass, trying to hustle in their careers, find a little bit of like an emotional reinforcement that they're on the right path, they're doing a good job, they're talented, and just kind of like a reminder to keep going and gets them to a little bit to the next level, I think.
Yes, yes. How do you approach tailoring services such as, diverse range of clients and major labels like Warner Music or Warner Records, to an independent artist like Brianna Mazzola?
Yeah. I mean, we try to really customize campaigns based on where gaps are in clients' careers and what they need. And I think it's different for everybody. Sometimes people are like, I have $1,000. What's the best way to spend that money? What's the most effective way to spend that budget? Or maybe it's them being a producer and writer in their bedroom and they're talented, but they really need someone to help take that to the next level. So is it pairing them with a producer and a writer that's going to help bring out the best in them and help challenge them to kind of like take their music to the next step? Uh, Maybe it's, helping them, like we talked about before, finding a way to share their story in a way that gets across and connects to fans. So I think it's really different for everybody. Artists need, I find that a lot of artists tend to need like this feedback loop, right? So much of their creativity is kind of in their brain all day long. They're listening to their own music, their own demos, they have their own ideas. And so sometimes they just need someone to say, is this a good idea? Like, do you like this? Does this look cool? I've been thinking about this for 6 months, and I need to talk to someone about this. And so helping people to just figure out the strategy and really like
Hmm.
fine tune the creative is definitely a lot of what we do too.
Let's talk about, the angel numbers that you
Mm.
incorporated into your daily operation and decisions and making the process at 444 sounds.
So, it's funny. It makes me sound like I'm a very kind of, into numerology and like all these things, which I never really had thought about. And I stumbled upon this article about angel numbers and what they were,
Yeah.
and I really gravitated towards the numbers 444 because they represent growth and direction and support and all these things that I wanted for, my artists and that I wanted the company to represent. Um, and then I started seeing these numbers everywhere. And so that's part of it, is that they say once you start
Mhm.
seeing these numbers, you see fours. And so I've been seeing numbers and fours everywhere. Where like I look at the clock, it's 444. I look at, you know, like an art, a page, and it's like the number four. Like I see it everywhere now. It's crazy. But we really try to like weave that into the company fabric to sort of say, like, we're operating from a place of helping artists to develop and grow, and maybe it's
Yeah.
not the traditional thing that's going to like skyrocket them into virality, but it's the thing that's going to set them up and build the tools for them to have like a financially independent career where they're able to make music and do what they love and make money and set themselves up for a foundation that's going to help them build like long-term success, because a hit song doesn't always make an artist. And so
No,
it's really about like their overall growth in all of these arenas.
absolutely. Joe, where do you think the music business going the next 5 years? Where, the
Mm.
direction? To me, been in it since a long time. I don't want to reveal my old age, but I've been in it since the physical days.
Yeah,
And so I seen the transition. Where do you see the music business going, and what's missing in the music business right now? What does it need?
that's a great question. I think that what the music business really needs is more tools and knowledge and transparency for artists about a lot of different things. I think that most artists are not necessarily business people, and so there's not a lot of resources for them to understand, the decisions that they're making and how it might affect them in the future, or the deals they're signing. It's definitely um, like artists tend to rely on the people in their network around them, and half the time that ends up being their sister-in-law, their friend, their someone who likes them and decides they want to manage them and maybe doesn't know what they're doing. And so I think that more resources for artists is going to be really important as there are more independents.
Hmm.
I also think that there's going to be a wider gap between like artists who are okay and decent and doing music because they love it as a hobby, and
Yeah.
artists who are really at that next level. There's so much competition, and I just don't think that there's a lot of room for like anything less than incredible moving forward. And so the competition is really steep. I think that artists are going to have to kind of level up, and this mentality that a lot of people have about, well, let's put out a song every month and let's see what happens. You know, I don't always love that approach, because I think that the songs end up being maybe 80% a lot of the time, and it's like I would rather have five songs come out that year that are really incredible songs. We really take the time to drill down and market those songs and push those songs. And um, I think that there's so much music that just doesn't get heard.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that there's going to be more companies like mine who are really taking the time to, work with artists one on one to like help them build out their careers and build sustainable futures. Because there's just not the labels don't even have the bandwidth to support these artists from day one anymore. They want artists, and I understand they want artists to come to them when there's a little bit of an audience developed, because they don't have the resources to devote to these
Yes.
artists to help them grow from the beginning, from the
Abs-
ground
ab-
up.
Absolutely. And I think company like yours and the services you provided, well, I'll say one thing. I wish there were companies like yours or you were around back when I
Yeah,
started in the business. We'd save so much money, the advice, the help, the knowledge, and the navigate and to navigate what to avoid, what to do, what not to do. Absolutely. And I think
thank you.
even companies like yours right now more needed because I see that more and more artists becoming more and more independent. This
Hmm.
whole setup, that old setup that been around for years, it will change because of the technology and the way we're going to consume music. I would say the next 5 years is very important time for us. That's when we're going to slowly start to shift a new way of consuming music. And companies like yours will grow even more because they need that independent service, not tied into nobody controlled, but somebody actually could care and give the helping hand, give the
Yeah,
guidance, give the yes, absolutely,
that's the
the
hope.
proper advice. Yes, well, it is. You are definitely in the right time. Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're positioning yourself at a time where definitely only for growth for
Thank
the
you.
services that you provide. Sure, Joel, it's been an interesting interview, and I'm sure a lot of our viewers and listeners going to be inspired by your story, starting from when you were running after high school or after school, I should say, running to Epic to the city. And I know that's a drag, taking the train to Midtown. From Midtown, I don't know how did you walk it because there was no Uber and taxis and
You know,
expensive for a
I
young
I took the
kid.
subway. I took the
Oof,
subway.
yes, yes. And back and forth every day. So that's by itself is to inspire anybody who have excuses and who want to be inspired. So what's your advice for anybody when they watch this and say, you know what, Joel did it. Nothing is impossible. I could do the same thing. We could do, I could make it happen. And we're in a business that's very competitive and still there's a lot of gatekeeping in this
Hmm.
business. You know that. Nobody wants to share, nobody wants to help. So please
Absolutely.
help them.
Listen, it's not a cakewalk for sure. Like you're
Yes.
to your point, nobody is wanting these smaller companies to kind of sprout up. Like the big companies want they want to control everything. And um I think that it's a little bit scary and daunting to go out when you say like, oh my gosh, how am I going to compete with these major labels and these companies with all this money and all this stuff. And what I found is that I think just even taking that leap to put out that energy that you're supporting people, you're helping people, that you're partnering with people, it's come back to me, tenfold. And that people, like, I think, feed off that energy. They hear, honestly, it's so much word of mouth. I think that one of the top things that I would say is try to do a great job with a project, no matter how big or small it is, because that manager that you're working with, or that artist that maybe right now has 1,000 followers on Instagram,
Yes.
it could be huge. That manager could be someone who's going to help you down the line. Like, I think that there's a tendency in this field to, like, maybe write people off if they're not quote unquote important, if they're not a big manager, if they're not a big, key player. Everybody grows up, and all those people that were assistants are going to be the executives of tomorrow. And
Yeah.
so it's about, treating people really with respect, putting out the energy that you want to get back. And I think, like, really building a good reputation for yourself. There's nobody that's going to be a better publicist than yourself for you. And so I've found that, I feel like the energy and the effort that I put into the relationships with people, real relationships, um, they just come back, and word spreads that, that you're a good person, that you're doing a good job, that you're a hard worker. And so it's like, it's not easy, but I think for people who want to start their own thing, it's like, keep your head down and just kind of like do the work. And it's hard, but it's really rewarding when you find that success.
Yeah.
Because it's not, there's so many independent artists now. Like, there's a lot more control in the independent
Yes.
landscape than there ever was before. So it's a great time for people to do their own thing.
Well, again, you're not just a music service expert, and you're also a mentor and a motivator, which is great. We need to add that to your services. I can give you mentorship too.
I love
Absolutely.
it. I got to do
Yes.
that.
Yes. You heard it here first with Joe Aboud. Joe, anything that you would like to announce or mention that you're coming up with a product, a new service, a platform on if you want to advertise it or mention it so people go look for it or go to your platform, to your website, or anything you'd like to advertise, please feel free for our listeners and viewers.
Listen, I think that there's a lot of fun stuff coming. Right now, we're rolling out, we're preparing to roll out what's going to be, I think, a new, distribution funnel for artists that need that additional support. Um,
Amazing.
and I think also we're working on, we have our hands on a lot of things, but we're also working on some new tech to empower artists, and I think build some tools that are missing, or hone in on tools that are much needed, for revamps. Lots to come.
Wow, great. This is amazing. I love it. I love it. So you're not leaving nothing for nobody, nothing on the table. You're grabbing it all.
That's the goal.
Yes, well, definitely been an interesting, insightful, and inspiring interview. Thank you for joining us today. And
Thanks
this
for having
concludes
me.
today's episode on Soundbreaker. My pleasure. Please make sure to follow us on socials and stay tuned for our next episode. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to share the Soundbreaker podcast. And if you are joining us on YouTube, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Until next time.